All right, Tony's ready. Very good. Well, this turned into a little bit more formal meeting than I thought we were going to have, but I appreciate you all coming to talk with us. We'll go around the room so that you know who we've got in the room, and then you can start off with introducing yourselves to everyone first, and then we'll come around and have everyone else introduce themselves.
Wonderful. My name is Jay Vincent. I'm a contractor with Williams. I've worked with them for nearly 10 years, and I am on the public outreach team and leading on this project to introduce this project to commissioners, communities, and other key stakeholders.
Very good.
And I'm Oliver Sutton with TRC. We are contracted by Williams to handle kind of the full spectrum, broad nature of this project, from everything from land acquisition to survey, and kind of all encompassing. I handle right-of-way acquisition and manage the permitting process of this project as well.
Very good. We'll go around the room. We actually welcome back Dion. He's been sick for a little while, and he's a reporter for the Wichita Eagle. But if you want to introduce yourself, you're welcome to.
Don Leffler, it's great to be here. Great to be back in the job.
Good.
You guys had a big win last night against the Hoosiers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That was awesome.
Justin Wagner, Assistant County Counselor.
Jim Weber, I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works.
Jessica Ryan, Transportation Engineer, Public Works.
Tommy Cole, Assistant County Manager for Admin Services.
Keith Clayton, Public Information Officer.
I'm Tom Stoltz, County Manager. Mike Premier, County Counselor.
Ian Spears, Director of Public Works. Jim Allen, County Commissioner.
Michael O'Donnell, County Commissioner.
David Dennis, County Commissioner. It's going through my district, so.
Perfect.
Dean Baxter, County Commissioner.
Lacey Cruz, County Commissioner.
Well, thank you. Since it is going to impact us, we wanted to make sure we had everybody, and I don't know how many people it's going to impact that are in this room right now, but we wanted to make sure we had the people that were hit, that possibly have some impact to be here. So we'll turn it over to you all. We appreciate you coming.
Wonderful. Commissioner, thank you very much for inviting us this morning and for convening the larger group. It's actually quite helpful for us to meet you all. And following this meeting, we may schedule some one-on-ones, I'm sure, with some of the team here. But again, my name is Jay Vincent. I'm a contractor with Williams, and I'm here to talk to you this morning about a new project that we've proposed called the Bluestem Pipeline. Inside the briefing folders that I've handed out, my apologies to those that I'm not able to share a folder with this morning. I didn't bring enough for this large group. But inside that folder, you're going to find a map behind the project summary on the right-hand side of that folder. For the first part of this, I'm going to reference this map quite a bit. So what we're here to talk to you about is approximately a 188-mile proposed pipeline project. It will be a 16-inch diameter steel pipeline that will basically take NGLs from Conway, Kansas, and ship it all the way down to Kingfisher County in Oklahoma. So we'll travel approximately 188 miles. And over the next, basically between now and the end of 2020, we hope to both conduct all the research, land acquisition, engineering, permitting, and construction of this pipeline. So before I go any further into this project, I wanted to point out a couple of the other resources that are inside of your folders. You'll find a bit of information about Williams for those that aren't familiar with the company. You'll find a bit of information here. We do have assets in the state of Kansas already that you may be familiar with, and we can talk about that as we proceed. In addition, you'll find a brochure about our leak prevention and detection system, as well as some of the safety information about our operations. So I encourage you to look at those and ask us any questions as we proceed here. But to get back to the pipeline, we're designing this pipeline to take natural gas liquids. These are basically materials that come through the exploration and production process of natural gas in the northeastern part of Colorado and Wyoming. And currently we ship these NGLs from that area to Conway, Kansas. There we store it at our mid-continent fractionation and storage facility. So that facility today does not have the ability to take this product and put it into the various streams like propane, butane, ethane, etc. So what we will do is construct a pipeline that will connect to an existing system. That existing system is called the Grand Prix system, and it's owned by a company called Targa Resources. Targa is in the process of finishing construction of that project, and we'll build what's called a lateral from that pipeline to meet our pipeline in Kingfisher County. So they call that the Velma to Kingfisher lateral. Once that pipeline connects with our pipeline, we are done in the process of shipping that. Then Target takes responsibility for that and ships it to Mount Bellevue, Texas, basically along the Gulf Coast. So what you see on the map here is essentially a blue line. What this blue line represents is a quarter-mile study corridor. And that study corridor is already in the process of our teams out requesting survey permission to be on landowners' property. You may have, remember we called some of you to let you know that our folks would be out there knocking on doors, talking to landowners in January. We've begun that work in earnest, and to date we've received 92% permission across the various parcels to survey those properties. So we are already in the midst of centerline civil survey, field and archaeological survey. So we're well into our work, and we expect to have that done by early summer and make an application later on this summer. We'll make an application to the United States Army Corps of Engineers, both the Kansas district as well as the Tulsa district. So that will be the lead permitting agency for this project. Following its construction, it will be regulated by the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Pipeline Material Safety Hazard Materials Administration, also known as PHMSA. So between now and essentially next spring, we hope to complete our permitting so that can pave the way for us to begin construction. Most of the land that we are crossing is agricultural land, currently farmed. 85% of the proposed route and study corridor basically co-locates our pipeline adjacent to existing pipeline right away. So in these areas, the land has already been disturbed, et cetera. So that pipeline that in many cases that will be paralleling is around 8 to 10 years old at this point, so a very young pipeline. So we start in McPherson County and we go all the way towards the Kansas border, and we cross over into Oklahoma in Harper County. So the longest stretch that we have is through Reno County, as you can see, but we do cross through the western part of Sedgwick County. You'll see at mile marker 50 is the first mile marker that we put on the map here. And that is in Sedgwick County, and it passes through Cheney and then crosses into Sumner. The study corridor crosses through Sumner as well as Kingman into Harper County. So at this point, we are where we have yet to receive survey permission. We're continuing to request that permission from landowners so we can continue our study and complete it this spring. And you'll begin to see our land agents back in the field in the coming months to begin right-of-way acquisition for this project. So the pipeline itself will transmit 125,000 barrels per day of NGLs. These Y-grade NGLs, like I said before, are destined for the Gulf Coast. So the capacity of this pipeline, though, does allow us to expand in the future. So that would potentially happen later on down the line. We have no contracts for that sort of work today, but this pipeline, as built, will be able to handle additional capacity in the future. The operating pressure of this pipeline is 1,480 pounds per square inch. As it transmits natural gas liquids, those liquids are not actually a liquid until they reach a certain pressure. So if they escape the pipeline or when they are not actually in the pipeline, they're actually vapor. So these are typically much different than an oil pipeline, much safer, and they really don't pose a threat to groundwater because of the vaporous nature of the materials transported. So I could speak for quite a while on this project, but I think that is a nice, substantial enough overview of what this project is about, what it does, where it goes, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jay. Just a couple questions. I'm sure that our engineer will have some questions, but you're going under 54. You're going to bore under that then, or we're going to have to close down 54? For
54, anything that's ODOT related, we'll do a horizontal directional drill or an HDD, and we'll have entry and exit points both outside of the Kansas DOT right away.
Okay, and what about our county roads?
County roads, as of now, all road crossings are going to be jack and bore or some sort of a conventional bore, so the roads will be undisturbed.
Okay.
So, even in the case that some of the, you know, unmaintained ones that you guys don't get out and blade as often, or dirt, caliche, whatever material they are, generally we're going to HDD. We try to do that. It's a lot easier for us to maintain that consistency across the board rather than to come in and, you know, trench or open cut some of those roads. So as of now, I have not been given any information that says we're going to do anything other than bore every county road crossing from top to bottom.
So other than driving on our county roads, you're not going to have any impact that you know of to our infrastructure?
We shouldn't. And typically what I try to do from a permitting standpoint is get with any of the construction managers or contractors that we're going to use, try to identify our route well in advance so that we know in the event that we need to, one, procure any type of access roads or road use agreements with any landowners, or to let you guys know our route, both coming in and out with pipeline, water, things of that nature, so that you guys can understand the impact that it may have. Because you guys may say, hey, we can't use this road because certain times of year it's going to be problematic, and then we can adjust our route accordingly. So that'll definitely be part of the process that we sit down and coordinate with you all.
Okay. In order to maintain 1,480 PSI, normally you're going to have a station in between here if you're going away from McPherson down to Oklahoma. Is there going to be any of those in Sedgwick County?
We don't know that. So until survey is complete and until they get the viability of the line established and the location, we won't really know exactly where any of those valve sites or meter stations will be exactly. They're proposed in certain areas right now, but again, that's all subject to change.
And let me just share something additional on that as well. That the valve stations and meter stations are going to be different than what it seems that you were asking about, which is more along the lines of compression, something along those lines. So with a project like this, instead of a compressor station, which would be what we would be building somewhere around the middle point of the line, we won't have to do that in this case because we're not pushing methane through the pipeline. When we're pushing natural gas liquids through the pipeline, we can typically have a pump station at the beginning of the pipeline and be able to transmit the 125,000 barrels per day with that one pump station. Down the line, if we're to increase the capacity or really increase the flow rate through the line, we would add an additional pump station or two, and we have no plans at this point for that. So that would be something that would come down the line.
Okay, well, I'm very familiar with the one over by Haven, because I've been in and out of that several times. A good friend of mine ran that station. So.
Okay.
With that kind of pressures, we do run our fire department out in that area. Do we have to have any kind of special training or anything for our fire department to be aware of this?
I don't think there'll be any additional training. Many of the emergency management organizations that we've been involved with are already trained for this when they have pipelines operating in the area, but we will partner with your emergency services to ensure that they have the training that they need. So that is something that we do typically through some of our community grant programs, or we work directly with communities and our response personnel to do tabletop work and whatnot. So that's something that we will absolutely partner with you on. But we wouldn't, at this point, expect that there would be any additional training that your team would need, being that there are facilities such as this that operate in the county already. But if there are unmet needs that we need to be aware of, I think we're here today to learn about those so that we can plan them for down the line.
Good. Well, let's see if any of the other commissioners have any questions at all. I don't see our engineer. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Thanks for that presentation, first of all. I want to say this is very interesting to me, but I have a couple questions. I'm curious, so what's the typical depth that the pipeline will be buried at?
There's a lot of variables that come into play. Each county is going to have different requirements when it comes to bore, but typically we're 36 to 48 inches. But there's a lot of existing infrastructure and foreign lines that are out there that are going to cause us to most likely have to go a little bit deeper in certain situations. When we come across DOT crossings, those are going to be deeper. Railroad crossings, we're going to be at usually 10 feet from the top of pipe to the bottom of the rail. So generally, I think 36 to 48 inches is probably about average.
When crossing agricultural lands, for instance, the Department of Transportation has a set of regulations that govern this. It's 3 to 5 feet, and that will be, that depth of being buried will be engineering dependent, but as Oliver shared, it's likely to be right around 48 inches. And then when we go under crossings is where we're typically deeper. And when we cross under rivers, which we'll be doing by horizontal directional drilling, it's very possible that we're 50 to 60 to 80 feet below the creek bed or below the river bed. So in those instances where we're doing HDDs, it's quite deep at that point. But the typical pipeline will be about 4 feet deep.
That raises another question. How far linear, you do the HDD, how far across lane can you do that? You're going at 80 feet deep, that must be a pretty long distance.
It is, yeah. It basically will be a long arcing parabola, but about 1,000 feet is for your typical river crossing. We'll be out 1,000 feet from both ends of the
So when you bore under one of
river.
the roads, like a township road or even a paved road, how do you backfill? I mean, assume you have to drill a hole bigger than the pipe to insert the pipe. So how do you backfill that so it doesn't translate
It's
some
the
sediment
way
depth to the
the way
surface?
that those rigs work nowadays. It's not much. The puncture hole. It's almost like when you're putting a stud into sheetrock or drywall in your house. It's very similar to that. So you're kind of just punching it through, and then you've got your entry point, your exit point. And you're just kind of pulling that pipe through. So there usually isn't much gap or space between those. Sometimes they're filled with concrete. Sometimes it just really depends on the crossing, and engineering usually and design will come up with that.
That's right. In most cases, counties don't have regulations that instruct us on how that fill should happen, but it will be very much engineering dependent.
Do we have a depth requirement in Sedgwick County, or just let them do, you said 36 to 48, some counties are different. Do we have a requirement in Sedgwick County? What do we know?
I'd just say they're going to be a private easement, so we don't regulate how deep they're on private easement. We would be looking at the crossings of the county and township roads. And this, I would just say what they're talking about, 48 inches below the ditch lines we'd be good with that. That's the lowest part of our road typically. We want to make sure we have things there.
And I think it might stipulate that on, I've got a copy of the permit application form, and I think it's on there. Most of them are set to either DOT or AREMA standards, so they're pretty consistent, at least in the 5 counties that I've looked at that we're crossing. And I think you're right, it's somewhere around 48
So
inches.
someone's doing some digging, they call 811. Are these lines detectable from the surface?
It depends on the age of them. It depends on what tracers might be there. So a lot of times we've got to reach out to entities individually based on GIS information or data that we collect, so that they can come out and pothole or locate some of those lines, because some of them are extremely old, and then you've got fiber optic lines and other types of telecommunication lines that can kind of interfere with the ability to be able to locate those from the top of the surface when they're going out and trying to ping it.
And I would add that the new pipeline here, being that will parallel an existing pipeline, that today is already very well marked, and we will add additional markings to mark ours. Additionally, this will have valves at about every 7 to 12 miles. This will be very engineering dependent, but when we're ever crossing a major river, for instance, there will be a valve at each side. Typically, those are able to be remotely turned on and off or shut and closed. So we have a 24/7 monitoring program for a project like this. And it's a very sophisticated system. I can't speak well on it, any better than the brochure that I've included here for you, but I can tell you that it will be operated out of Houston. We have redundant systems in Tulsa, and this will be a world-class 21st century pipeline. The thickness of this steel, as it goes most of the route, will be about 1/4 inch thick, and where it crosses major streams and major roads, it will be about 1/3 of an inch thick. So,
But it's a single wall, correct?
yes, single wall.
And you have a way to monitor the leaking, apparently.
Yes.
So it must be based on volume inside or something.
That's
So
exactly right. We'll monitor for volumes, and we'll monitor for pressure. Pressure decreases are the first sign of some sort of leak in the system. With NGL transportation, typically small leaks are basically identified very soon because they typically, being that there is so much pressure, those pressure drops happen very quickly, and they move very quickly to respond to that. So pressure drops are taken very seriously.
I'm curious about the going across fields and stuff. I know they're marked fairly well towards roadways and things like that, but going across a field, there's no way to mark that, is there?
Oh no, there is very much so. Yeah, some of the right-of-way these pipeline markers will be right in the middle of the field. And sometimes, depending on the size of a parcel, sometimes a landowner may be host to several markers. It'll all just depend on.
How often do you guys do the inspections on these pipelines?
We inspect in a variety of different ways. So we do a biweekly aerial inspection of all of our facilities. So that means we're flying over these to see if there's, typically we're looking to see if anybody's started to build a home, started to build a garage over it, which happens quite a bit. Exactly, planting trees. Most of the pipeline ruptures that occur are based on folks actually puncturing into the line. So marking it is incredibly important. But our monitoring is not only just aerial survey. We have our team monitoring it 24/7, and then at an indeterminate amount of time, but at kind of a every several year interval, we use inline inspection to inspect the pipeline. And so what that's called is smart pigging, and we send these into inline inspection tools, and they go in with their sensors and they measure the pipe thickness, they look for dents, they look for any rust, they look for deposits of materials that are gathering on the inside of the pipeline. They can also determine if there's any dents on the outside of the pipeline with this tool. It's pretty amazing. I've seen them inserted into the system. Sometimes they're adjacent to a valve or adjacent to a metering station. So we will do that every several years.
I have two more questions, and they're both really little. One of these is, I'm just curious, it doesn't change my opinion at all, but I'm just curious, is there payments to landowners for use of their land?
Yes.
This goes across their land again?
Oh, 100%. Yes. No, they will
I
be.
assume that would be true.
They will be compensated. In my experience, they'll be compensated above fair market value.
And does this have a tax liability to the owner of the pipeline that pays utility taxes, I assume?
Like ad valorem taxes and whatnot. There are some positive tax implications for our project being in the state of Kansas and in Oklahoma. I can't speak well to those, but if there is some specific information you'd like me to gather, we'd be happy to go ahead and do that.
I was just curious. I assume this was a taxable asset of some sort.
Yes.
So I don't know how that works, but
Yeah.
okay.
But we'll purchase an easement from them, obviously, to be able to, the right to be able to put that in. And then obviously if there's crop damages, things of that nature, we'll remediate and rectify those as well.
That's all my questions. Thank you, sir.
Is that why you picked our state?
What do you mean?
Why did you choose? I have two questions. Why did you choose where it's going to go?
Okay.
And who's going to use the gas?
So right now we're taking natural gas liquids from Wyoming and Colorado and already transporting it to our facility in Conway, Kansas. So what's happening there, being that there isn't a market and a petrochemical complex to basically, they send these to the Gulf Coast because there are crackers down there, and those crackers are able to separate the various components of that Y-grade NGL stream and separate it into butane, separate it into ethane, et cetera. Being that those facilities that do that don't exist up here in Conway, we have to get it down to Mount Belvieu, Texas. So we're taking responsibility for building this 188-mile route because we can hook into an existing system, the Grand Prix system. So the reason we've chosen Kansas and Oklahoma is because those are the states, but Kansas because this is where we already operate our business. But to get to where we need to send this gas to, the best bet is to go through Kansas and Oklahoma. So our strategy with developing this pipeline route is to have a quarter-mile study corridor that we will basically fully survey. And what I mean there is we will survey the entire route. The Army Corps of Engineers does not require us to do that as part of the permitting process. Instead, they require us to survey areas that are adjacent to major crossings. In the end, what that doesn't enable us to do is avoid the things that we want to avoid, like populated centers, remains from tribes of the past, et cetera. So we are conducting a full survey of the entire 188-mile route so that we can avoid certain areas.
And who uses the gas?
So when we deliver it to Targa Resources will then deliver that to Mount Belvieu, and at that point, that gas will be sold. It'll be utilized in Mount Belvieu at the petrochemical complex there, and it will be sold and transported for a variety of different operators. But we don't have the information on who specifically will buy these NGLs because Targa will actually be taking that product and selling it at market.
Any other questions from commissioners? You said this is parallel to an existing pipeline. Do you know
It's a
how
one
big?
oak, I believe it's a one oak line that was put in probably within the last decade or so. So about
Okay.
85% of our entire route's going to be paralleling them. So we'll have essentially adjacent or abutting easements. So hopefully the impact, like you had mentioned earlier, is fairly minimal since it's not green space we're going into. It's existing right-of-way corridor.
Very good. David, do you have any questions from an engineering standpoint?
Not really. I mean, it looks pretty straightforward to us, and you know you need a permit for each county road and public right of way, and you know that. You work with Jessica in our office on that. It looks like it's kind of interesting if you've been doing a straight line. If Cheney Lake wasn't there and you didn't have the other easement, you could have missed Sedgwick County altogether.
Sure.
Very possible.
But that's the way it is. So, no, it's pretty straightforward to us, I think, Mr. Chairman.
Do
Very
you guys
good.
have floodplain permits here in Sedgwick County?
Yes.
Okay. And who, do I go through Public Works for that, or do you have someone specific that I would need to?
It's in,
MABCD, so the floodplain manager, I'm the floodplain administrator. So,
Okay.
yeah, and then we've worked with Public Works.
Perfect. And you can kind of point me in the direction, okay.
Chris Labram's head of our MABCD, and he can take care of you there.
Perfect. Okay. Excellent. And then a couple other questions I've got real quickly regarding permitting. Obviously, for most of our crossings, when we're going to be crossing into your county roads, ideally we want to be at 90-degree crossing angles.
Yes.
Sometimes that is not possible given, the nature of the crossing with existing infrastructure and other variables. Do you guys allow for variances, say from 45 to 90 on a case-by-case basis once we're able to show why we can't exactly cross at that degree?
Yes, I would say we have flexibility on that.
Perfect.
Just the main thing is, and as you know, we want to bore, not cut.
Exactly. And that's our intention and our plan always. It makes it a lot easier, even though the cost is a little bit greater. It's much easier for us to maintain
And
that.
then, as Jim was saying, you have to have the cover in the ditch. That's a critical point because we clean out the ditches quite often.
Absolutely.
Mess with you.
And do you guys have any type of temporary or permanent driveway permits that are required within these road crossings? For instance, if we need access to the right of way, maybe it's a county road that's not quite as maintained or developed, and there isn't existing access from that county road into the right of way, and we might have to construct a temporary access road to get in there. Do we need to permit those, or just make sure that we're adhering to certain drainage
That's a
stipulations?
good question. Would you, Jessica?
We can handle that as part of
Okay.
the permit.
Okay. And at some point, we had mentioned, valve sites, meter stations, things of that nature would require some sort of permanent drive if it's not existing as well. So those are things that once we've identified and located those, if they are within this county, we'll reach out to you all as well.
Jessica, do you have a card with you? You can leave with them. Okay. All right. At the end of the meeting, if you can get them your card, and Chris probably know to leave the card with them also.
Perfect.
So, very good. Anything else, David? All right. Legal issues.
We'll look into anything that comes up. I'm not going to ask you right now, Justin. Do you have any?
Very good. Mr. Manager. Jessica, you got anything you need with them? Jim, you got anything?
Clarification, they're talking about jacking and boring, so they're not putting in a casing? And you're not doing under the road?
Typically, what we do is we increase our strength and diameter or width of the pipe for those crossings to avoid that. So with like DOT, most of those, they'll have certain REMA standards that we need to meet. So if we're coming in at a certain, wall depth, as soon as we hit that crossing, we increase that in lieu of casing. We find that a lot of studies and statistics show us that a pipe that sticks together that does not have casing in reality is safer than those that are cased and maintain that thinner wall. So
Very good. Justin, you got anything?
I do not.
Very good. Chris, you got anything? All right, make sure you leave the card. Anything from PIO? Very good. You got other questions for us?
One thing we often like to share with the PIO, if I may, is that once construction begins, we do a very good job of making sure that you know what's going on when our crews are out in the area, et cetera. So you can count on some early spring 2020 visits and updates on what that's going to look like. So
I plan to give you my card as well.
very good. Thank you.
Very good. You're going to get some free publicity today. Dion will make sure he writes something up for this from the Eagle. Okay. Well, I don't know that we've got any other questions, but I appreciate you coming to speak with us. If you can leave your...
Yes.
Do you have other cards besides...
We'll both leave a card.
Good.
Inside the folder is the Director of Public Outreach for this project, Maria Palacios. And so if you were never able to reach me, then you'd be able to reach Maria very easily. Feel free to reach out to her.
Okay. Sure.
Quick question. I'm looking at the cathode protection and low voltage electrical system preventing erosion of the anodes. How often do you close that?
That's ongoing through the...
I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that I'm aware of. And if I have seen it, I didn't know what that was. It's just a interesting thing that you don't know what you're looking at. You probably had no idea that it's related to the gas pipe.
Yeah. It's essentially it reverses the effects of corrosion, removes rust, and prevents it from happening in the future.
The whole pipeline, 188 miles, has these type of anodes.
It has
right above it?
cathodic protection across the entirety of the pipeline, and then our existing pipeline, which travels through your state, we can confidently tell you that it does the same.
That is interesting. Okay, that's a technology I didn't know was out there. Very curious. It's very interesting. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So the cathodic protection that you've got out there, is that a big field that you put over the top of the pipeline, or is it a small
probes
anode?
that
It's just
go into the ground.
It's just anodes.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Well, don't forget to stop by our office, and we'll give you your so that you can park over here for
Very
free.
good. Thank you very much.
If you got any questions, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're going to go across the